Hello everyone, my name is Sun Tanaka. Today, I will explain how to set up a DHCP server and automatically assign IP addresses. After that, we'll move on to setting up a PXE server and building a network boot system. By learning this, you will undoubtedly gain skills. So, let's get started. DHCP is a mechanism that automatically assigns IP addresses to devices within a network. It eliminates the hassle of manually configuring IP addresses. For example, when you connect your smartphone to your home Wi-Fi, the DHCP server automatically assigns an IP address to your smartphone. The reason your smartphone can connect to the internet is, in most cases, thanks to this function.
Swimsuits have nothing to do with it, but if the router is performing that role, isn't it unnecessary to set up a separate server? If there's any specific reason for needing it separately, please let me know.
Hello, Tumuji. While it might not be necessary in a typical household, it can come in handy in certain situations. For example, there might be situations where you don't want the router to assign an IP address for some reason. I've explained this in detail in a previous video, so please check that out if you're interested. Now, let's move on to the practical part.
Thank you.
We'll be setting up on an Ubuntu 24.4 server, and I recommend doing this via remote connection. Using a remote connection allows you to copy and paste, which is very convenient. I've explained this in more detail in another video, so please take a look if you're interested. But before that, let me briefly explain its convenience. For example, when developing a web application on a remote server, using VS Code allows you to write, test, and deploy code with the same ease as if you were working locally. Well, I only work on small projects, but this convenience is particularly beneficial in large-scale projects or projects involving multiple developers. Let's wrap up the explanation of the convenience of VS Code here and move on. Let's check the current network environment and IP address situation. By checking this first, you'll be able to clearly understand the changes after the setup. Although Ubuntu itself is newly installed, Docker has been installed, so the virtual network is displayed. We will refer to these two GitHub pages as we proceed with the setup of the DHCP server and PXE server.
I somewhat understand the DHCP server, but could you explain the PXE server to me?
Yes, I understand. I'll explain it with diagrams.
It would be really helpful if you could illustrate it with diagrams. It makes it easier to understand.
PXE is a mechanism that allows a computer to boot over a network. Without using a USB drive or D2D, you can directly load the OS or utilities from a server on the network. When introducing a large number of new PCs, you can use a PXE server to install the OS and perform initial setup in bulk. Here is the network diagram. First, the client PC obtains an IP address from the DHCP server. Then, it connects to the PXE server and downloads the necessary data for booting. This allows the PC to install or boot the OS over the network. And here is the data flow diagram. The flow diagram complements the explanation of the network diagram, essentially showing the same process. While the appearance is different, the actions performed are the same.
I see. Thanks to the two diagrams, I now better understand the relationships and structures, even though they appear different visually. Comparing both diagrams has deepened my understanding.
Let's get back to the task. There's an important point. Here, creating a fixed custom network in Docker. Docker automatically creates a default bridge network called Docker 0, and this network is used unless specified otherwise. However, since a new IP address may be assigned every time a container is restarted, this is highly inefficient. Additionally, as I'll explain later, if the IP address changes with each restart, you'll need to reconfigure the container settings. From here, we'll use the contents of the two GitHub repositories introduced earlier. I analyzed the contents of these two GitHub repositories and created a docker compose.yml file.
So, does that mean you combined the contents of the two GitHub repositories and integrated them into a single file to create your own docker compose.yml?
Yes, since it's all about challenging myself, I gave it a try. As I'm working on it in this video, I found it convenient to use VS Code, as it allows you to review the file contents while creating the YML file. Oh, the prompt to install the Docker extension plugin just appeared. In this video, we'll install the extension. but it's not strictly necessary. Installing it allows you to manage Docker containers more intuitively, creating a more efficient development environment, but it's worth mentioning that everything can still be managed via the terminal alone. Now let's go over the contents of the YML file, which includes the combined configurations for PXE and DHCP, along with a custom network description. For those who want more details, there's a link in the video description where you can find the files and modify them to suit your environment.
This is really interesting. So, you'll be launching the container based on this YML file, right?
Yes, don't forget to save the YML file we just created. Now, let's use the docker compose command to launch the container. Using Docker makes setting up applications and services simple, and it ensures consistency across different environments. It also allows for efficient use of resources and improves scalability. Most importantly, it prevents the installation and refinement on the PC from becoming cluttered, and you can easily uninstall everything afterward. Let's check the status of the container. It seems to be running normally. Also, since we installed the Docker plugin earlier, you can visually confirm it as well.
So there are some handy plugins as well.
Now that we've launched the container, we need to check the network status. Looking at this, you can see that the network status has changed due to the container being started. In particular, the custom network we created earlier with the Docker command is reflected as an interface outlined in red. Additionally, you can see that a VEF interface is also displayed.
I really don't understand what the VEF interface is doing. I'd like to understand it at least a little. I don't think the swimsuit is related, but could you explain it?
Sure, I understand. A container is similar to a virtual machine, and it has its own network interface. The VEF interface is like a cable, with one end connected to the container and the other end connected to the host's network. Through this cable, the container can communicate with the host and the internet.
Thanks to the cable example you provided, I was able to understand it. Thank you very much.
There's still more to do. We'll add a subnet declaration for the new fixed network. Next, we'll add the DHCP service configuration file. Since the configuration file is mounted from the container's directory to the host, we'll edit this file on the host. The file I'm about to show is the content of the default configuration file. However, it won't work properly with this content, so we'll modify it based on the IP address and network device information from earlier. The reason for creating the custom network becomes clear here as well. When using the default Docker 0, the IP address may change when the container is restarted.
Oh, I see what you mean. So, because the IP address changes, you need to edit this configuration file every time, right?
Yes, exactly. This should prevent you from being troubled by such issues. Since we've edited the file, don't forget to save it. Oh, it seems an error occurred while trying to save the file. It seems that the user logged into VS Code doesn't have right permissions for the file. Since we're using VS Code, it doesn't make sense to use Linux commands in the terminal to change the file's ownership and permissions. Therefore, we'll install a plugin that allows us to save the file directly with root privileges.
Wow, there's such a convenient plugin available? So, with this plugin, you can exercise root privileges without having to use commands?
Yes, that's right. It seems that anything you can think of, someone has already developed. The method for saving is shown in the video. Great! We've successfully saved the changes. Since we and Eve modified the DHCP configuration file, we'll need to restart the container.
This has been really educational. When using VS Code for remote connections, there are many aspects where it's much more convenient compared to other software.
Yes, I think so too. Next, we'll connect the client to the server we set up and check if iTeam's functioning properly. We'll connect to the server configured through the hub, like this. We'll use a Windows PC as an example to verify the operation. Make sure to disable the client 10's Wi-Fi, otherwise it will receive an IP address from the router, which you need to avoid. The IP address assigned by the router belongs to a different segment, so it won't be on the same segment as the DHCP server. Thus, we'll enable only the wired connection. Oh, it seems the IP address has been successfully assigned by the DHCP server. Now we know IT's working correctly, but let's double-check in the command prompt. Alright, everything is perfect so far. Next, we'll check if we can ping the internet. As mentioned in the previous video, this server is configured with IP forwarding and NAT.
Oh, the ping is working well. It's a great outcome that we can connect to the internet, not just locally.
Since everything is working so far, the browser should be able to load pages, but let us double check, just to be sure. Yes, the result is as expected. The IP address is assigned by the DHCP server, so there is no need to configure Internet Protocol version 4. Next, let's check if the PXE server is functioning as well. On this client PC, the BIOS settings offer two boot modes: UEFI and Legacy Support. In this video, we selected Legacy Support. Additionally, we chose Legacy first in the boot priority settings. We also moved the network boot to the top of the boot device order. Here, let me briefly explain UEFI and Legacy Support. UEFI is a firmware interface designed as a successor to the traditional BIOS, offering faster boot times and enhanced security features. On the other hand, Legacy Support is chosen when using older hardware systems that do not support UEFI. The reasons for recommending UEFI boot include faster startup, enhanced security, and support for large capacity disks. After much effort, I successfully configured the DHCP settings to support both UEFI and Legacy Support.
Really? That's great news. So, the previous DHCP configuration file only supported Legacy Support, but this one supports both, right?
Yes, that's correct. Now let's verify the PXE boot functionality. Since some of you might be using older PCs, we'll enable Legacy Support and proceed with the boot.
We did it. Now you can install the OS over the network. Congratulations.
Thank you. With a little tweaking, you can also install it on VirtualBox or VMware without any media. However, take a closer look. You will notice that the OS version is outdated. Moreover, while the OS selection screen appears, the installation itself doesn't actually work.
What? That's a problem. I have a USB, but its capacity is too small to be useful. But there's a solution, right?
Yes, but first, please watch the video. Right to install any distribution. This is a critical point, so pay close attention. As mentioned earlier, the version is outdated, and an error occurs. So let me show you the solution. Actually, if you look at the Docker Compose file, you'll see that it is configured to be accessible via a browser. As shown in the video, you enter a URL with your server-IP address, followed by the port number.
Oh, it seems you can update some files. This is the cause.
Exactly. Since this file seems to be frequently updated, I recommend checking it in your browser from time to time. Let's try installing the OS over the network once again. Now that IT's been updated, the version has been upgraded. Additionally, the latest version of the OS is displayed.
The question is whether it will install successfully. I hope it goes well. This is exciting.
Yes, if you've made it this far, the installation should proceed smoothly. So, in this video, we covered how to set up a DHCP server and a PXE server.
I learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Well then, everyone, see you next time. Goodbye.